All video games have difficult bosses, but some bosses are just way above and beyond what is expected. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 bosses locked in ultra difficulty modes. Starting off at number 10, it's the Final Fantasy VII Remake Pride and Joy. Now, this is a Final Fantasy game, so of course there's going to be some kind of super hard bonus boss. It's just a given. But what makes this guy unique is you can only face him when playing hard mode. And even then, only after basically doing everything else in the game. Hard mode in this game changes a few things. Enemies are tougher, of course, but it doesn't let you refill MP at benches anymore. Worst thing, though, is that you can't use items. Like, you can't use items at all. At this point, you're pretty reliant on using ethers to restore your MP, but that is totally out of the window, so that change alone makes the game a whole lot harder. And Pride and Joy is the ultimate challenge. Well, actually, just getting to them might even be harder than the boss himself, because before you even get a chance at the robot, you have to fight a bunch of summons in 4 consecutive rounds, with the last one making you fight 2 summons at the same time. Bahamut by itself is the hardest fight in the entire game, so having to deal with a Freet on top of that is just completely nuts. Also, if you think this thing looks familiar, it is because the same robot exists in the original Final Fantasy VII. It's called the Proud Clod, and it's the robot that you fight when you return to Midgard near the end of the game. Even though it's just a prototype, this thing is still way tougher than in the original game, and is a huge pain to deal with. At number 9, Bloodborne's Watchdog of the Old Lords. Now, this one is just cruel. If you want to do everything in Bloodborne, you're eventually going to have to play through the Defiled Chalice dungeons. This is a randomly generated dungeon that has one thing about it that makes it incredibly painful to play through. While you're in it, your health is lowered by 50%. This is a game where you die after only a few hits anyway, so cutting your health bar by that much turns many attacks that used to be damaging but survivable into one-hit kills, and it turns the 3 bosses of this place from things that normally wouldn't give you a lot of trouble to some of the hardest bosses in any Souls-like game. Probably the worst among those, however, is the Watchdog of the Old Lords, a big flaming dog that you have to fight as the boss of the second layer. There are 2 things that make this guy such an ungodly pain. At first, it's really aggressive, so you have to be very careful when you attack, and be particularly careful of its area of effect attacks, many of which can kill you instantly and are often hard to tell how far away you have to be to avoid damage. And on top of that, this thing itself just takes a ton of damage, especially on New Game Plus. It just becomes this slog of a fight where you have to hit this thing so many times, and it will kill you instantly if you screw up even once. In a series about hard battles, this is just one of the worst, because the difficulty modifier of the area you have to fight it in really takes it up a notch, to say the very least. At number 8 is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I'm talking about Crazy Hand and Master Hand. Master Hand has been the final boss of Smash Bros. Since its humble beginnings on the Nintendo 64. In the sequel, Crazy Hand was introduced, a more chaotic and difficult version of Master Hand, which would only appear if you finished Classic mode in 5 minutes and 50 seconds. In Brawl, this became a true hard mode boss, and you could only face it while playing hard, or playing on something higher than hard, obviously. For Smash Ultimate, the thing kept its hard mode cred, as you have to fight it and Master Hand at the same time if you play through Classic mode at 7.0 intensity or higher, which is basically the game's equivalent of a hard mode. Taking on both these things at the same time is just not easy. While Master Hand is predictable, Crazy Hand, true to its name, just goes nuts the whole time. It's erratic as hell, and even if you know what it's going to do, trying to deal with the weird timing of its attacks just makes it a total pain to fight. Fighting games love to put in surprise bosses if you play through arcade mode well enough, but Smash Bros. Is one of a few games where the boss actually changes depending on the difficulty you're playing on, rather than on your skill level. I mean, yeah, it's just wildly hard too. At number 7 is Star Fox 64, Andross's Brain. Depending on the path you take through Star Fox 64, the end boss will either be a robotic duplicate of the bad guy or the actual final boss. See, the interesting thing about Star Fox is it's deliberately structured to kind of give you a different experience each time based on what you do in the game, whether you display more skill and collect more things or go through more rings or whatever. It's pretty weird either way. No matter what path you take, the first form of the final boss is this floating monkey head with 2 hands, and it's not really that difficult to take down. If you play through the hard route of the game though, which involves doing this obscure stuff like flying through all the arches on Terraria, you get to see the true form of the final boss, a giant floating brain. It's also pretty creepy for a kid's game. I can remember playing this. I was just becoming a teenager when I played this game, and I remember being like really insistent I was gonna get to that final boss the correct way. You know, like a real gamer. And I remember kind of being weirded out by it. Like, the music's actually really good at setting a tone, but he's also super tough. He teleports around like crazy, and just getting a good shot in can be a huge challenge in of itself. At number 6 is Terraria. There are more hard mode bosses than regular ones. That's probably the best way to describe what's going on here. Terraria is unique in that it is a game where you can play completely peacefully. Just chill out, just build your little village. Or you can go balls to the wall, fight all kinds of crazy monsters, and get just utterly ridiculous and insane loot. It's up to you, and that's part of why the game is so popular. Getting totally crazy is just how the game works. When you start in normal mode, where the gameplay is more idyllic and enemies are less aggressive, you can dig deep into the underworld and take on the wall of flesh, and the game transitions into hard mode, which creates new, much tougher biomes in the world and generally just makes everything a lot more difficult. There is a ton of new bosses when the game changes over. While there's about 7 bosses exclusive to normal mode, there's like 10 you can take on in hard mode. And while most of these guys need to be summoned, so you don't have to worry about them just appearing out of nowhere and annihilating you, it's still better to be extra prepared before going into hard mode in this game, because they really just throw a lot at you. There is no going back also, so yeah, know that going in. At number 5 is Contra III's true final boss. So the Contra games are kind of nasty regarding difficulty. In a lot of them, if you play it on easy, the game is just going to not let you play the final level at all, period. No questions asked. Like, you play it on easy mode, so you don't deserve to see the whole game, I guess. Not necessarily a design philosophy I personally subscribe to, but yeah, let's say you play on easy and miss out the last level, but if you play on normal, you miss the final form of the last boss. Normally, you fight this giant alien-looking dude named Emperor Demon Gava, and then battle it out with his brain, which, for some reason, is called the Living Brain Organism Searle. You kill it, and then you fly away in a helicopter. In the standard game, that's where things would end, but if you're playing on hard, things get even crazier. The brain transforms into whatever this is, now called 6 Men Pharaohmatos, and attacks you. So you had to fight it off while hanging off the helicopter, and it is not easy, but if you've gotten this far, it's also not going to be a lot tougher. It's just more. Like, it keeps throwing more and more stuff at you, which is tough. At number 4 is the Galactic Knight in Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Of all the games you would expect to see this kind of thing in, Kirby is just not one of them. Famous for their easygoing atmosphere and relatively low difficulty, Kirby games are really just a lot of fun and not particularly stressful. A surprising thing you probably don't know, however, is that they're also filled with tough bonus battles and secret bosses, many of which are so much tougher than anything in the regular game. Like in Return to Dreamland, after you beat the game, you unlock Extra Mode, which is a harder version of Story Mode. Beat that, and you unlock the final challenge, which is called the True Arena. This basically amounts to a boss rush. You have to take on 15 powered up bosses in a row, including a special bonus boss that only appears in this mode called the Galactic Knight. This is not the only game he's appeared in. He also shows up in Superstar Ultra, Planet Robobot, and more, but he mainly appears as a bonus boss. Even though he's a cute little pink guy, he does not screw around. He comes off like a Devil May Cry boss, in my opinion. At least closer to that than something in a Kirby game. And remember, you don't even face him until after you've dealt with 12 other souped up bosses. Pretty much every Kirby game hides something like this in them, and it's never not funny to see these games suddenly get super hardcore for the post-game. At number 3, Donkey Kong in the Wii version of Punch-Out! So, In Punch-Out on the Nintendo Wii, after you play through the game one time, you unlock Title Defense Mode, where you'll refight all the previous fighters, but this time, they're much tougher. They've got new punches, new tricks, and they can even dodge your super punches, along with sometimes having a new look. Basically, Title Defense Mode is hard mode. If you manage to finish it and defeat the toughest rematch against Mr. Sandman, you will get a surprise challenger, Donkey Kong, and this monkey puts the previous champion to shame. Pretty much every single one of his punches is an instant knockdown if you don't dodge him, and if you try to punch him while he's taunting, which he does, by the way, all the time, he almost always counterattacks. He's just really tough all around. Like, the Punch-Out games are already hard enough, but DK puts the rest of the guys in the game to shame. And he does it without throwing a single barrel. The only thing is, we have to test him for extra potassium. Is that illegal? I don't know. Banana joke. Haha. At number 2 is Inner Agent 3 in Splatoon 2's Octo expansion. We didn't really expect to put a lot of Nintendo games on this list, to be completely clear, but here we are. Splatoon 2's Octo expansion ends on this really tough fight against the previous protagonist of the game, named Agent 3. This fight is hard enough on its own, but if you manage to do everything else in the game, you can fight a hard mode version called Inner Agent 3. That means you have to collect all 80 mem cakes, which is not easy. Yes, the Octo expansion can get pretty tough. The fight's mostly the same as the original, with Agent 3 being more aggressive, accurate, and of course having more health. Altogether, it turns what would otherwise be a pretty tough fight into a near impossible one. And that is not all. The arena is smaller and there's less surface area for you to ink, meaning you're going to be able to maneuver way less. It's not a flashy fight, let's just go ahead and say, but it is really, really hard. And finally, at number 1, it is Undertale's Genocide Route Sans boss fight. So, Undertale's an RPG where nobody has to die, but if you want to make the game really, really challenging, then something's gotta die. Well, actually literally everything. The total opposite of the pacifist run where you don't hurt anything, you can instead play through the game and kill everything in an area. It is possible in this game to fight enough battles in an area that the enemies actually go extinct and there is nothing left. If you do that for absolutely every area, you're doing the genocide route. It's not particularly hard, just very, very tedious, at least for most of the time. Once you hit some of the bosses, it's a different chestnut. There's actually a lot of other changes that happen if you play this way, but suffice to say, it's normally a pretty cheery game, and it turns into a total bummer. The real challenge isn't until the end, though, where you have to face off against Sans in an absolutely insane boss battle, where he throws everything at you for his first attack. Just surviving the first attack itself is very, very difficult. That's all for now, though. Have you actually beaten any of these boss fights? You got any insights, feel like you want to share? Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.